a little bit of an introduction that is not my house. My confession is that this is Trace the History of Your Home, but my home is a year and a half old where I live now. And so it's real easy because I'm the first and so far only owner of the house. So, but I have been doing this work of tracing the history of your house for almost 4 decades now. My background is I worked here at the library for 44 years before I retired. And part of my job was helping people research the history of their house and do genealogical research. So my knowledge is extremely local. So if you ask me how to trace the history of your house in Wisconsin, I have no idea what the systems are or how you log into the registry of deeds or things like that. I'm talking essentially Strafford County, New Hampshire, and maybe Rockingham and other counties in New Hampshire that work similarly. So my knowledge is really local because I'm used to dealing with local people when I worked here in the library. I was also part of a group called the Dover Heritage Group, and I'll get back to these later, but from 1979 until 2007, we picked a different neighborhood every year and did a walking tour of that neighborhood, led people around and did the history of the houses. So we had a committee, and so for about 8 to 12 months before the next walk, we would all divvy up the work and research the house history. So I spent a lot of time. I've probably done like 300 house histories in Dover. So that all came from that, and that came also from working here. More on these later. So when you're researching the history of the house, there's no right or wrong place to start. You'll start one area and then you'll hit a roadblock and you'll try another and you'll come back, and sometimes they'll cross over each other. You'll find out something that leads you back to where you started and you cross that way. So there's no correct pattern in the way this works, so you can do it any way you wish. There are 3 things to know if you're researching the history of your house, and I'm going to talk only about the third one. The first one is architectural details in your house and neighborhood comparisons. So if you're living in a house that's all Victorians, well, your house might be Victorian too, unless, of course, it was torn down and something else was rebuilt in its place. Physical evidence, and this is interior details and things like that. So when I was doing house histories, I never asked permission, but I was not allowed to just go knocking on doors and go in these houses and look for details. So I really focus on documentary evidence. So that's what we're going to be talking about here tonight. So Dover is extremely lucky in that we have 11 architectural styles right within this sort of Silver Street, Summer Street neighborhood, starting at the top with the colonial. We have the Dam Garrison, of course, 1675, going through Georgian, Federal, Greek Revival, Italianate, Second Empire, Victorian, Stick Style, Queen Anne, Craftsman, and Colonial Revival. And you can visit all of those styles within like a 1-mile walk. So Dover is really unique that way. So within those styles, I talked about interior features, some things if you're in the house and you're looking at figuring out how old your house is, some of the things that you might be looking at inside that I have not looked at are framing techniques. Is it heavy timber? Are they hand-sewn beams? Are they machined? Are the nails in the boards? Are they hand-wrought iron nails? Dover had an iron factory way back. So were they nails made in Dover, or were they machined nails? The windows, the style of the window, the number of panes in the glass, the actual glass in the windows and the age of that, the lintels and the trim around the windows, interior woodwork, the doors, the hardware, the hinges, the doorknobs, all kinds of things like that give you clues. Plaster lath work in the ceilings and the walls, horsehair plaster versus modern plaster. Again, you could be led astray because they've replastered in the last century. The foundation, is it old fieldstone? Is it a brick foundation? Is it more modern and poured concrete? Look at the paneling, look at the fireplaces, look at the chimneys. And all of these interior features will lead you to decide which house is your architectural style. So I'm going to start with kind of the most confusing, but also where you might find the most information. And that is at the Strafford County Register of Deeds. If you Google Strafford County Register of Deeds, there's a big, long website name, co.strafford.nh.us/this. Just Google Strafford County Register of Deeds, and you'll get there. When you get there, it's a little bit confusing. You'll see a green button. I don't have it on this. This is the third or fourth page you get to that I'm showing you now. First page says, click here to search county records, a green button. Click the green button. Then it says, another page says, click here to search further. All right, you click there. So your second page. Third page is a disclaimer, so you have to accept the agreement. So you say, I accept on the bottom. Finally, you get to the fourth page, which says, do you want to search with Laredo or Tapestry or Ava? And you're like, what? I have no idea. So I last gave this talk 7 years ago, and there was no Tapestry, nor Laredo, nor Ava. So I had to do some relearning myself to prepare for this talk for tonight. Found out that Laredo is a monthly subscription. It's what's used by lawyers' offices, attorneys, title search companies. It could be a monthly fee of $50, or some of them are $75 a month, depending what level of membership, and you have to have a credit card on file. You don't want to do Laredo unless you're going to be in there all the time. So ignore Laredo. Second one is Tapestry. Tapestry is for occasional users, not frequent users, but if you're going to be doing a lot of house histories, you might want to look at Tapestry. Every search is $6.95. Again, you have to put a credit card on, and they debit you a certain amount. I think they take $30, and then they debit from that. And then anything that you print is $2.75 to print a page. So you're like, well, I don't think I want to do Tapestry either. So it says, how about Ava? Ava is free. I'm like, yes, that's the one I want, Ava. So you're going to search Ava. If you do print, they charge you $1 to print and a 5-cent convenience fee. So it's $1.05 for every page you print. But it is free. So this is Ava on the screen right now. And you fill in what you can, the last name, the first name, the start date, the end date of the deed, any information you know. So if you know nothing at all about your house, you do know the current owner. In most cases, it's you. In other cases, it might be your landlord's name. You got to start with you. And who did you buy it from? Well, you might have the deed already that has a book and page number. Book and page is very important because that gets you to the earlier deeds. And at the bottom of that deed, there'll be a link to an earlier book and page. So then you go back in history a little bit and get an earlier book and page. So book and page is very important. The other two terms that are very important are grantor and grantee. The grantor, T-O-R, is the person selling the property to the grantee, who is the buyer. So grantor and grantee. So remember those two terms. So Ava is very interesting in that Strafford County has indexed images from 1828 to the present. So if you're researching a house that's an 18th century house, you can't put a name in here and get results because they haven't indexed it back before 1828. But those are the images. The data only goes back to 1921. So I'll explain these. I'll do a couple of searches. And then if you want to, you fill in what you can with names, start and end date, book and page number, all things like that. So then they have a thing called the old back indexes, which ironically are unindexed, but they call them indexes. So Ava is very confusing because you got to remember the 1828 image date and the 1921 index date for data like names of the owners and things like that. So I was thinking we'd do a search, but you can get really bogged down in these. So you just got to feel your way with Ava. So I wanted to show you the page that you need to get started with, and you fill in there. The key is if you've got your deed and at the bottom it says book and page, well then you start down here and you fill in just book and page. Never mind all the rest of it. Just fill in book 211, page 560, and hit the search up at the top there on the right, and that will bring you right to the deed. So if you've got book and page, that's good. In many cases, you do not. So I searched a deed just arbitrarily. I picked one, 1946, Dearborn to Dunaway, a property on Silver Street. And this is what a deed looks like. I, Mary Dearborn, in consideration of $1 and other money, are selling this property to S. Judson Dunaway and Anna Dunaway of Dover, property on Silver Street. Then you'll find the description of the property, and sometimes that could be important to you, but most times it's not, because it uses names that aren't in use anymore. Like the property line goes over to Mr. Brown's house. Well, Mr. Brown isn't there anymore, so it's like, well, what do they mean? And oftentimes, if you get to the earlier deeds, it'll measure things not in yards, but in rods. So you have to do the conversion from yards to rods. But what you're really looking for is what I've highlighted in yellow at the bottom, that this is the same property described in the deed of Almanzor Toll to Mary Dearborn, June 1895, and recorded in the Registry of Deeds, book 307, page 258. 258? 268. Okay. So then you go back to the AVA search and to put in book 307, 268 to see Almanzor Toll's deed to Mary Dearborn. However, if it's before 1921, you can't put in the last name. You have to type in, I've highlighted it here, these two words called index books. So if you're back in the 1800s, this is the AVA search. Again, going back to that big beginning AVA search page, and you type in nothing else, fill in no blanks, even if you know names, and just type in the word index books, which brings you to a list like this that says index books, and they are by decade. You can see 1911, 1901, 1891. So it's 10 years. So the index books, and then it says they're unindexed, which I think is kind of ironic. So you choose a decade by clicking on it. You're guessing at this point. That's why searches sometimes take a long time. So I clicked on one. I think I'm looking for something between 1891 and 1900. So I've highlighted, there's a little yellow thing that looks like a page of a book. So you click on that little yellow page, and it brings you to the pages of that book. But it brings you to page 1 of that book, the 1891 to 1900 book. So if you're looking for somebody whose last name is Corcoran, it brings you to page 1, which is Abbott. So you have to use the little things at the bottom to advance the pages till you get to the C's. But there's a trick. If you hit this button, which means go to the last page, they have this index in the back that gives you a clue as to where your deed is located. So if you're looking for C's, it's between 66 and 118, or page 78 is the CH's, page 95 is the CO's. So at the bottom, you say, okay, Corcoran, they're going to be around page 95. So you type in 95 and hit go. It'll bring you close. You might have to flip back and forth for a while, but eventually you'll get to a deed. So I found the one I wanted, and there is end result. You find the book and page number only. As I said, they're unindexed. There's no images here. They're just unindexed. So I want the Canavan deed, book 211, the first one, Patrick Canavan to William Lane, book 211, page 560. So then you go back to AVA, back to that first AVA search page, and in the book and page blanks, you don't put in the names, just put in 211 and 560. and it'll bring you to the deed. So here's that I, William Lane, I'm selling to Patrick Canavan, land in Dover, blah, blah, blah. When you're reading old deeds and you're trying to date your house, read the deed carefully, because it may say I'm selling land, and then 10 years later, you notice they're saying I'm selling land and buildings. So that gives you the 10-year span that you know your house was probably built in that decade. Not the exact year, but it gives you an idea of how to narrow it down a little bit. So this is 1852. But if I put in William Lane and Patrick Canavan back in that AVA search, it won't find it because it didn't index it by name because it's before 1921. Are you confused yet? It's very confusing. So I have this lovely cartoon that says, this is how you feel after you use AVA. So my advice is maybe Tapestry or Laredo are better, but I don't want to pay $50 a month to find out, or $6.95 a search. So get used to AVA, playing with it. Remember, you're looking for book and page numbers. That's the key. But if I were advising you what to do, I would say the easiest thing is to go there. Go to the Strafford County Register of Deeds office at 259 County Farm Road. They're open 8:30 to 4:30, Monday through Friday. They have very helpful staff. They will set you off to do search. They won't search for you. They won't give legal advice or anything. They won't interpret a deed for you. But they'll help you use the grantor and grantee index books, and you can do the research there. And sometimes it's just easier to sit there physically and do it there in the office than to play around with AVA and get really, really frustrated. Their phone number is 742-1741, and they will be very helpful to you. So let's go back. That was the most confusing thing. But when you get to the deeds office, start with AVA and see where you can get from there. Let's start again, back in the library's historical room. This is where my comfort level is. Now, in the historical room are the old city directories, family genealogies, maps and atlases, many, many local history books and town records, annual reports. It's right across the hall. The library's open 7 days a week, except in the summer, closed on Sundays. So it's a very helpful reference staff to help you get started. So let's start with maps. This is the earliest map of Dover that exists. It is an 1827 map by the postmaster, Asa Tufts, who drew it. And each house and building is marked down. It's hanging on the wall in the historical room. And this is, of course, downtown. You can see the Cocheco River. And each house shows how far it was from the post office. So that was Asa Tufts' purpose in making this map, to show how many rods, again, use of rods, it was from the post office. So if your house is near downtown, you might find a little X or a little cross on there that shows there's a house there. It does not give names. The next map is the White House map, 1834. All of these maps are hanging in the library. Feel free to use them. Dover and Dover Village. A lot of information in this map. Again, no names, but it shows buildings. And lots of information in the information down here, and that's hanging on the wall in the other room. The next one is the 1851 map of Dover. It's Dover, Somersworth, which was called Great Falls, and Rollinsford, which was called Salmon Falls. And this is the first map, 1851, that has names. So if you find your house, there'll be a name written next to it. Extremely helpful when you're searching further. So 1851 is a good one. 1856, this is a map of Strafford County. Also has names, very detailed, and it has around the border of the whole map is really great pictures if you're interested in seeing some historical images of what the area looked like. And then we have a map case also in where this map hangs, and there are many, many more loose maps in the map case. This is an 1870 map. It's Dover, Great Falls, and Berwick. Again, we're moving a little bit up in history, and it does have names on it. Around 1870, 1880, Dover decided to renumber all the streets. So this can be a big warning signal to you. You have your relative and you see them at 213 Central Avenue, and all of a sudden in 1880, they're at 742 Central Avenue. You say, oh, they moved up the street. No, they didn't. Between 1870 and 1888, they renumbered all the streets in Dover. So it can be very confusing. So using these maps is very helpful because you can look at the 1856 map and say, yep, there's the house, there's the name. In the 1870 map, no, they're in the same place. They just renumbered the street because Dover was growing, so they decided to do a renumbering, just like they did here a few years ago. We have an 1871 atlas of just Strafford County. This is a bound paper atlas that's in the historical room. Again, has names on it, very accurate. We have the 1877 bird's eye view map of Dover, and there are two of these. This is the earlier one. These are extremely detailed. So if you live within the periphery of this map, and if you went to that address today and looked at that house, it would look like it does on the map. I don't know how the person who drew the map did it, but those are exact renderings of what those houses looked like in 1877. They did another one 11 years later, 1888, the bird's eye view map of Dover. So you can see the mills there in the middle and all the houses around it. If you go to the Library of Congress website and go to memory.loc.gov, you can see these maps online and you can blow them up until you can get a really good image of your house, and you can print it out as well. So that's the bird's eye view maps. The next one is the 1892 Atlas of the State of New Hampshire. Big, big paper atlas. The library has a copy of this too. You'll have to ask reference for help in using it because it's extremely fragile and really falling apart. But it's a really good atlas with a lot of information and a lot of names as well. Helps confirm what you think you've already found. The next one is an online resource, but I put it under maps because it does contain maps. The Sanborn Insurance Company did maps of cities all over the United States. They were a big insurance company, and they did it mainly for fire prevention. So this is an online resource, and I'll show you how to get there when we get to that part of the library website. Primarily, it shows downtown areas. So if you live out 6th Street or out Toland Road or out Court Street, you're not going to find your house in the Sanborn maps. It did downtown sort of heavily populated areas. They are available for, we have the whole state of New Hampshire, but if you're looking for Dover, there's Dover in 1887, 1892, 1898, 1905, 1912, 1925, and 1946. So it shows you the building outlines, the size, the shape, the construction materials, because they were a fire insurance company, so it really depended if your building was made of wood or if it was made of brick in terms of how much insurance you were going to pay. The height, the usage, I might say tannery, it might say horse barn, things like that. The street and sidewalk widths, where the pipes were, and the boundaries. It has, the houses are shown and the numbers, but no names are given. They didn't really care about the names. They cared about the materials and the construction. So that's a really good resource as well. This is current, which I'm assuming most everybody knows about. It's maps.dover.nh.gov, and this is the City of Dover's current mapping software. And you can go on and look at a property and how it is currently, what its evaluation is, what the property taxes are, the names of the people who live there, the size of the lot, photos, a little bit of a deed history. There could be some book and page information there if you want to know who you bought it from. And then another print resource is the Dover Heritage Walks book. I mentioned all those separate pamphlets over there for when we did the different neighborhoods. Dover 400 this year compiled all those into one great, wonderful indexed guidebook for all the properties that we've done over 29 years. So there's good historical information and current photographs of the houses in that area. So that's we have this for sale downstairs too, as well as you can use it here for free. So that's a good extra information. We have microfilm in the library, 1828 to the present, from the Dover Inquirer to Foster's Weekly to Foster's Daily. And you can sit at the microfilm machine and just run through the reels looking for any sort of information on the owners or the house, or say you've got an obituary date, or you think something happened on a certain date, or there was a fire or something. So you can, used to be that you'd sit there for hours and hours and hours and hope to sit something good. Sometimes you do still have to use it, but there is a better way to go now. So this is the library's website. So I'm going to talk about online resources. So when you go to the library's website, the two areas that you want to be in for doing house research are where the red arrows are: research and learn, and or local history, either one of those. So under research and learn, you'll see databases, Dover history, Dover images, Dover obituaries, the Heritage Walk tour booklets, which are those booklets over there. And then there's an Ask a Librarian option as well, where you can ask a question or ask for help. So the best new thing that's happened in the past few years are our digital archives at the library. So you can search city directories from 1830 to 1993, Dover High School yearbooks from 1915 to 2019, and Foster's Daily Democrat from 1873 to 1926. The library has a grant to even index more of Foster's. We're up to 1926, but we're going to go further. This is all keyword indexed. This is a huge help. You can put in a name and it'll bring up any location of that name within that newspaper within the dates. So I just picked a name, Dearborn. That was from that earlier deed. And I found this article, March 1915, I think it says. I just searched for somebody named Dearborn, and I found out that Dearborn is on the stand in an assault case. Many others testify, placing man in hotel at the time in question. And you can, so it picks out keywords. So this has never been available before. You could sit at the microfilm and look at Foster's, and after like 18 days of hunting on the microfilm and just having blurry eyes, you might find something about your Dearborn family. But this, you put in the search term Dearborn and it brings it right up. So in this way, if you find the names of people that in the deeds that owned your house and you want to know more about the people, I would say use the Foster's archives. And if they covered everything. This is back when we had a real newspaper who put in real news. And, you know, that the social club met at Mrs. Dearborn's house and had tea and crumpets. So that'll be in there. Mr. Dearborn was arrested in an assault case. Junior Dearborn had a car accident. And, you know, Mary Dearborn stole a horse. You'll find more about those Dearborns by searching the digital archives than you ever thought possible. And this is a real treasure and a real find. So if you've got a name, if you've narrowed it down to who are these people, I've got the names now, what did they do and who were they? This digital archive is really, really what you want to do. So I mentioned the city directories. This is what they look like. This is the 1830 directory, and it's alphabetical. And it tells you where their house was and what they did for a living. It only listed the homeowner. It doesn't list the wife and the children unless you were a widow or a spinster and you were the head of household. So those which are in the room across the hall, the Dover Historical Society, the whole historical room, you can still search those by hand and go through, but you can also do it through that digital archives. So you can find information really fast. But if you have a chance, look at the original directories. They're really, really cool to look through. And so it used to be that they only published it alphabetical, like all the Clarks were listed in alphabetical order. So, but if your family lived at 16 Washington Street, like Charles L. Clayton, you couldn't search by address. There was no component of the book that searched by address. So you never were able to do that until 1934. They started putting another section of the book of Washington Street, number 1, number 2, number 3, and they told you who lived at those. It was very helpful, 1934. Before that, you had to just search and search and search until you found something about Washington Street. But now with the digital archives, you can put in 16 Washington Street and it'll go right to this. I mean, it's such a time saver and such a valuable treasure and amazing information at the digital archives. So the other thing the library has online is our obituary index. Currently goes from 1894 to the present. It's an online a resource that you can search from home. So if you find a name that you want to know more about and you want to know when they died, and you think if you read their obituary, that'll give you all kinds of information about their family and their job and their business and their children, well, you can look them up in our obituary index, but it gives you an index to Foster's Daily Democrat obits, and it had to have been in Dover. We only did Dover obituaries. It tells you that the date it was in Foster's, like the first one, George W. Hurd. He died October 24th, 1905, and it was in Foster's on page 1. He must have been somebody important. He was on page 1. But you can't get to the actual obituary. So then you have to come in the library and sit down at that microfilm machine. But at least now you know, I'm going to this one certain date and one certain page, and you can get it right away. So the obituaries themselves aren't online, but you can find the date and page to find that as well. I caution you because the early obituaries back, I'd say earlier than 1880, 1890, are very, very brief. And you finally found your guy, George Hurd, and you get to the obituary and it says, George W. Hurd died yesterday at his home, services to follow. And that's it. They didn't write long obituaries like we do. So you could like hit the jackpot and then you get there and there's no jackpot there. They didn't do long obituaries. The other thing they did that's very hard, and the obituary index helps, but they would put obituary at the top of page 2 and another one at the bottom of page 4 and the other one at the middle of page 6. So if you're searching online in the microfilm, it's not like you go to the obituary page and they're all listed there. So it can get very cumbersome searching for obituaries. So the obituary index helps an awful lot. The other thing the library has online are all kinds of historic house photos. If you're lucky, I mean, we have probably 1,000 more or more, but mainly downtown houses. So if you're really lucky, you'll find your house. It's fun to look through them anyway. The other thing, we have cemetery records in the historical room. We have Pine Hill Cemetery records. We have records of family cemeteries that are on private property and who's buried there, done years ago by a wonderful man named Roy Ackerman, who went around and collected all this information and put it in a book. The cemetery office in Dover is extremely helpful about telling you if the person you're looking for is buried there and where their plot is, and they'll give you a little guide as to what avenue and what row and what plot number to find it. So the cemetery office is, the number is 516-6480, and they welcome those calls. So, and then not a library research, but online, you might have already used findagrave.com, which indexes grave sites all over the world and throughout the United States. So about 80 to 90% of the people buried in Pine Hill Cemetery, for instance, are in Find a Grave. So it's very useful. Sometimes it's frustrating because there was a cemetery I was looking for in Rollinsford, and they haven't done any of their stuff in Find a Grave yet. So I was sitting there wandering the cemetery one day trying to find some of my relatives. But definitely try findagrave.com. It's very, very good. You can search, you can narrow it down to a particular cemetery if you just want to search Pine Hill Cemetery, or if you want to just check a cemetery, if you want to see if St. Mary's Cemetery is in there, you can do that. So Find a Grave is very good, and the people in the cemetery office are very helpful as well. So, and then ancestry.com, of course, can help you with more biographical information and more genealogical information. If you have a subscription, you're probably already using it at home. If you want to use it in the library, you cannot use it from home. You can only use it in the library, because the people at ancestry.com are no fools. And they want you to subscribe and pay them, what, $400 a year to join ancestry.com. So we have a library subscription, but you have to come in-house and be physically in the library to use it. You can't use it from home. Like you can, all these other resources I mentioned, you can do them from home. And that's sort of been the big change over the years, in that you can do so much just sitting at your laptop in your dining room that you couldn't do before. Except I still say go to the county deeds office in person. So Ancestry, but use it only in the library. And then another one is called Heritage Quest Online, which is an online resource you can also use through the library. And that's also owned by Ancestry, but you can get more information there. They have the full text of 40,000 historical books. They have military records. They have the Social Security Death Index, and they carry census information from 1790 to 1940. So that's a quick overview of where you might start, but start with yourself. Lots of people can talk to relatives to find out. Some people find an old Bible in a barn and find information that way, or they're tearing down a wall and they find an old newspaper or things hidden in the walls. Relatives, neighbors. So you might want to start with oral history. You know, your grandmother remembers such and such living there, which is a great way to start. So you might start that way. You might start with yourself and then go back to who you bought the house from, who that person bought the house from, and then look for the term changing from land to land and buildings, which gives you the clue about what decade the house might have been built in. And then come in the library, check the city directories, check the obituary index, check anything else that you can think of. Look at all the maps, see what names are on the maps. And hopefully, and there will be conflicts and there will be frustrations along the way, but hopefully you can find a pretty good pattern and pretty good description of anybody who lived in your house. So, any questions at all? Yes.
So once you're working back the previous owners, the deed from the previous owner, will there be the book and page for the previous owner to that? So
yeah.
Every time you get one.
Every time you get one, you look at the book and you go, okay, and it'll be an earlier number.
And that'll be a different book.
It'll be a different book. So you take that, you found page 800, book 800, and then you read to the bottom of that deed and it says, they bought it from these people, and it's in book 700. Okay. So you put book 800 away, and you go get book 700, and you read that, and it says, oh, and they bought it from people in book 600. And then you go, okay. And then at some point, you'll get to the beginning, or sometimes you'll get to a dead end, and then you just. Okay. So it can be very frustrating. Yeah, it's important to know book and page, and important to know grantor and grantee, whether you're the buyer or the seller.
Yeah.
The only other terms I recommend knowing are the deeds are either called quitclaim deeds or warranty deeds. Doesn't matter too much in doing your house history research, but a warranty deed means it's sort of in what we call today a title search. We guarantee that these are the true boundaries. The quitclaim deeds means I'm just selling you to her, and this is what I think of boundaries. So it's not as guaranteed as a warranty deed. So, but yeah, so book and page. That's one of the really, really important things to know. So if you have your own house deed, you can see, or if you use the maps.dover.nh, the current maps, and look up your house, it'll have the book and page number of where you bought it from. It was recorded when you bought it on a certain book and page, and you'll see that right in the property record on the current maps of the city of Dover. So then you can go get to AVA, put in that book and page number, and it'll bring you to the next, to the earlier deed, to the earlier deed, to the earlier deed. It can be very confusing, but
Especially because the house is gone. So we have property where the house is gone,
yeah,
but there's a barn is there. And
Oh,
there's a
really?
cemetery there too.
Yeah.
So I know there was a house. The house we live in is newer, but I
Yeah.
know where that came from.
is it in the downtown
And
area?
it's 2 miles on total, 2 miles out.
Okay, so it probably wouldn't be in Sanborn. But you might want to check some of the maps we've got hanging around. Yeah, and see. We're good about mapping the current downtown area, but then as things got further out, it was harder to see. But you might also look at the bird's eye map, because those go out quite a bit
Okay.
into the suburbs, as it was at Dover. The hinterlands at the time. Yeah.
Is there anything that gives different street names for a given street? I just
Yes.
saw something today that says 6th Street was Brick Street.
Strix was Brick, Henry Law was Payne. Central Avenue was Franklin Street, Central Street, Pleasant Street, and Linden Street. It had 4 names before it became Central Avenue. And that can get really confusing. There's a paper here in the library that's all the Dover Street names and what they were called and when they started, so you might want to take a look at that. Yeah, they changed numbers, they changed names. They're doing everything they can to confuse you. Yes.
So if you're following the book and page search method, it's gonna not really abide by if your house number changed, because you're going by the book and page number.
But there's no address on the deed. They never list a physical address.
Yeah, because I tried, before coming to this class, I tried going through the Registry of Deeds website
Yeah,
and just conjuring up my own way.
yeah,
And I was using, at first I figured out who I bought the house from, and I just searched her name, and then it only went back to, I
yeah,
think it was like,
yeah. If you look at the old deeds, it just describes them by saying, it goes 120 rods by this way by Mr. Brown's property, and across this way it goes by Mr. Smith's property, but it'll say property on Silver Street, but it will never give you an address on Silver Street, so it describes it physically, not by the numbered address.
yeah, the last one I found was funny. It was like, so the west of Miss Tom McFarland's house. And,
Yeah, yes.
We have a New Englander, which was not one of the styles you listed up there. Is that a subset of one of the other styles?
Yeah, I would say so. It's not an officially recognized architectural style, but there's certainly a lot of New Englanders around here. I put it more in the,
You know what year it was built? That's.
yeah, I'm thinking like 1910 are usually around New Englanders, yeah. So it would be before colonial revival, but after craftsman. Yeah, you could call that a sub-style or something like that. I went out to Colorado once, and my husband had to go for work, and so I noticed that they had a historic walking tour downtown. I said, oh, I think while you're working, I'll go on this walking tour. So it was very nice. It was in Fort Collins, Colorado, and they took me by this beautiful, like, Victorian house, and they said, this is our oldest house in town. It was built in 1890. And I'm like, that's half the houses in Dover were built in 1890. They were very proud.
Same topic almost. You said or things showed a Greek something, Greek revival.
Greek revival.
Yeah. So what
That's
constitutes?
all the houses that going up Locust Street here on the right are all Greek revival. Kind of no clapboards, but look like a stone front with pediment roofs. That's Greek revival. So the dentist's office right next door, and then the corporation house right up the street. These are all built in the 1830s, and that's Greek revival. Yeah. All right. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah.